let's talk about the impact of installing packages. As we saw in that last slide before we cut over to this video, even with my ink still on it, and that's just fine, the way that we install a package is by saying pip install and then the name of the package. Now, what's going to wind up happening when we call this is it's going to install that package globally, which is a good thing, and sometimes it's a bad thing. That the impact of installing that globally means that it is going to be available for every application that you're going to be creating, but the downside is you might be running into some particular version issues and things like that. This is also relatively different than some other package managers such as NuGet or NPM that you might be familiar with, where in those cases what they're going to wind up doing is doing a local install of that package. So it would be available for just your application. Python does not behave that way. By default, Python is going to install all of those packages globally. So typically, as a best practice, what you want to do when you're setting up your application is to do a local install, and we do that inside of Python by utilizing a virtual environment. A virtual environment, put quite simply, is literally nothing but a folder that has all of the code that you're going to need to run the application that you're creating. So everything that I need is just going to be installed into that folder, and then I'm able to use it. Now, of course, I need to create that folder first, and we have a little utility called virtualenv that we can use to do exactly that. Now, we will need to install that, and the way that we do that is by saying pip install and then virtualenv. This one we want to do globally because we're always going to need that. And then the next step is to create that virtual environment. Now, like I said before, our virtual environment is nothing but a folder. That's all there is to it. So you'll notice in both cases here that I'm just going to specify the name of the folder that I want to create. You'll notice by convention, most people will just name it VENV, short for virtual environment. You can name it whatever you want. You can call it Wibble. You can call it, something else that might be a little bit more meaningful to you. It's completely up to you. Now, how you create that is going to vary slightly depending on the operating system that you're using. If you're using Windows, then it's going to be Python, which we've already seen, TIC-M, which stands for go grab a particular module, and then venv, which is that shortcut for virtual environment, and then specify the name of the folder again that you want to create. If you're using a bash shell, say inside of OS X or inside of Linux, then it's simply virtualenv and then the name of the folder. That's all that there is to it. And now, when it comes time to use that virtual environment, then what I need to do is activate it. And you'll notice the syntax to activate it here, and it's going to vary again depending on your operating system and also depending on your environment. That if you're using Windows, everything that you'll need will be inside of a subfolder called scripts. And then it's always going to be activate. It's just going to vary on the extension. That if you're using a command line, it's going to be a batch file. If you're using PowerShell, it's going to be a PS1 file. And if you're using a bash window, which is personally how I generally do things, then it's just simply activate, and then away you go from there. You will notice a slightly different syntax up at the very beginning here. You are going to notice that little dot, and then another space, a dot, and then the path to your folder. That dot is the location of your source code. You'll typically do this from the current directory. That is the syntax that you're going to need. Again, I've got placeholders for my folder names, as we've already discussed. Typically, that will be VENV, but it could be whatever folder name it is that you have identified. If you're using OS X or Linux, then it's the same as before. What's going to be slightly different is instead of scripts, it's going to be bin. That's where you'll find that activate, and then away you go from there. Now, to install into a virtual environment, After you've activated it, it's the exact same as doing a global install. So you'll notice, and I honestly just copied and pasted this slide and changed the title of it. It's simply pip install, and then whatever it is that you want. If you have a requirements text file, then it's pip install, and then that requirements text file. Okay, there was a lot that was going on there, and I think the best way to actually see all of this in action is to start working with it. So what I want to do is set up a little demo where we'll create a helper's py file, show how we can import that. Then we'll go ahead and create a virtual environment. We'll install Colorama into that virtual environment. And then we'll go ahead and use a little bit of Colorama in our demo. So that'll be the next video.